Hello and welcome back to Learn Linux TV. In today's video, what we're going to do is set up Gitea. Gitea is a self-hosted Git server, an alternative to something like GitHub, that you can run on your very own instance and maintain yourself. It's actually really easy to set up, and in this video, what I'm going to do is show you guys how to set up Gitea on AlmaLinux. Now, before we get started, I just want to take a moment to mention the sponsor for today's video, Linode. And Linode is not only a great fit for this video and this project, but also Learn Linux TV because Learn Linux TV runs on Linode. Now, specific to today's project, it's also a really good place to run Gitea. On Linode's platform, you can get up and running in minutes. And they have all kinds of distributions. For example, AlmaLinux, which is the very same distribution that we're going to be using in today's video. And if you don't already have your very own Linode account, you could check out the platform by using the URL that you see on the screen right now. You could actually get $100 in free credit to get you started with your brand new account. And considering that their instance types start at just $5 a month, there's a whole lot of Linux that you could fit within that credit. So the only limit to what you could use Linode for is your imagination. In fact, in this video, I'm going to show you the process of setting up AlmaLinux on Linode. So if you want to follow along with me, then go ahead and use that credit, and that'll get your free account started. And then you can set up Gitea on AlmaLinux like you'll see me do here very shortly. Thank you so much to Linode for sponsoring Learn Linux TV yet again. They've been a sponsor for quite some time now, and I really appreciate it. So go ahead and check them out, and you won't be disappointed. Now, with all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and get started and set up our very own Git server with Gitea. The first thing we're going to need is an AlmaLinux instance, but you can also use distributions like Rocky Linux or any other distribution that is based on Red Hat Enterprise Linux. If the distribution is compatible with Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8, then you should be fine. But you might have to adjust the commands accordingly if you run into anything that is specific to your distribution. Anyway, what I'm going to do is create an AlmaLinux instance here on Linode, and you could follow along with me if that's also what you would like to do on your end. But if you already have an AlmaLinux installation ready to go, then you can skip this entire section. And if you prefer to install AlmaLinux on your own hardware, maybe bare metal, or you could even have a virtualization solution such as Proxmox, if that's the case, then I do have a video on my channel already that goes through the whole process of manually installing AlmaLinux. So you can check that video out if you'd like. I'll leave a card for that right about here. But if you continue along with me in this section right here, then I'm going to assume that you would like to create an instance here on Linode. So on my end, I have these servers right here. I want to create a brand new server for this particular task. So what I'm going to do is choose AlmaLinux, and here it is. And then for the region, you could choose whatever region is closer to you geographically. And I'll just choose Toronto because Canada is awesome. And the next thing that we'll need to do is choose our instance type. And our instance type actually determines how many CPUs we have available, as well as how much RAM, things like that. Anytime you install any app on Linux, you obviously want to make sure that the server you are installing the app onto meets all of the requirements of the application that you're trying to install. But when it comes to the requirements to run Gitea, there's really not all that much. Gitea is relatively lightweight compared to other things that you could be running, so it really shouldn't matter which of these instance types we choose for our project. So what I'm going to do is just go up here to shared CPU. Those are the cheaper instances, and we should be able to get away with a Linode of 1 GB of RAM. But you could go with the 2 GB instance if you'd like, and that should definitely give you more room to work with. But what I'm going to do is choose the 4 gig version right here. That's probably going to be overkill, especially since I'm going to be the only one using it. Generally speaking, a 1 gig instance should be more than fine for Gitea, especially if only 1 or 2 people are going to use it. But I want this thing to be really fast, so I'm going to choose this instance type right here. That also gives me 80 gigs of storage, so I'll have no shortage of storage space to store all of my repositories. And next up, we'll give this instance a label, which is basically its name. So for me, what I'm going to do is call this git.learnlinux.cloud. So if you already have a domain name, then feel free to put the fully qualified domain name for your instance right here. But if you don't have a domain name, that's fine too. You could just call this Git Server, Gitea, whatever you'd like. But just give it a name that helps you identify what the server is actually for. Now, tags are optional, but it might be a good idea if you do have tags. In my case, I'm going to just pretend that this is going to be a production instance. Even though I'm technically only using this instance to show you guys the process, I may or may not continue using this after this video is over, but I definitely want to show you guys the whole process from the beginning. And then here, what we'll do is create a root password for our instance. Hopefully your password will be randomly generated. That's always the best way to go. I'll just type in my password right now because, again, this is just a test instance, so I'll just go ahead and create a password manually. Now, make sure that you remember this password because if you forget it, it's going to be very hard to log in. There are ways to recover your password that go beyond the scope of this video, so just make sure to save your password in a secure location so you don't forget it. And then we'll continue on from there. And next up, we have a backups option, which I do recommend that you choose, especially if this is going to be a production instance. But since this is just a test instance in my case, I'm going to leave that unchecked. We also shouldn't need private networking for this particular use case. So we should be good. I'll create the instance right now. And we already have an IP address right here. And that's pretty cool. I'll just copy that to my clipboard. I'll be needing that shortly. And right now, the provisioning process has begun. It usually takes 1 or 2 minutes or so for an instance to come online. And we can watch the process right here by clicking on Launch Lish Console. So this is almost like a virtual monitor. And if you see this right here, that means that your instance has not started up yet. It's still being built in the background. So we're just waiting for that to finish. And as soon as it does, we'll see a bunch of text just fly through the screen, and that'll let us know that the instance is actually booting up. And here we go. All right, so as you can see here, our instance is in fact online. So what I should be able to do is use SSH to connect to it. So I'll just copy the IP, which I've already done, so I probably didn't need to do that again. And I'll switch over here to my terminal. And then I'll just type SSH and then root at, I'll paste in the IP address, and I should be able to log into the instance. Let's see what happens. So I'll type yes, I definitely want to connect to the server. I'll type in the password. And now we're in. So at this point, before we actually install Gitea, there's some things that I would like to do first, just to make sure that everything is in the best possible state before we get started. Now, an easy thing that we can do right away is change the host name. Right now we just have a temporary host name. So we definitely want to make sure that we name this server with a name that's actually descriptive. So what I could do is type nano, and what I'll do is edit the hostname file, which is located at /etc/hostname. So I'll erase what's there right now. And in my case, I'm going to give it the same name that I gave it in the Linode dashboard. It doesn't have to match, but I like consistency. Consistency is always good. So I'm going to use the fully qualified domain name for mine. Now, obviously, if you don't have a fully qualified domain, you could go ahead and just call this whatever you'd like. Gitea, whatever you think is appropriate, but that's good enough for me. So Control-O and then Enter to save it, Control-X to exit out. And then there's one more file that we have to edit when it comes to the host name. So I'll do that right now. So what I'm going to do is actually customize this file quite a bit. I'm going to go all the way to the end of this first line right here because I don't need most of these. So just go ahead and back all of these out, except for the first localhost. And I'm not going to configure IPv6, so I'll leave the last line alone. But I will add a new line here. And this is the way that I like to set up the host file when it comes to adding a custom name. So what I'm going to do is type the same name right here. And if you're using a fully qualified domain name, it's also a good idea to type the abbreviated version here as well. So I'll save the file. And now the host name is actually all set. Now it's not going to show here until we reboot the server. And we could reboot the server right now, but I would rather install all of the updates first just to make sure that that's done. And to do that, I can run dnf update. So I'll do that and press enter. And, well, we do indeed have some updates. And I'll confirm the installation of these updates by simply typing Y and then enter. So it's going to download, it looks like 52 packages, so this might take a moment. So what I'll do is actually fast forward time to the future when this is done, so I'll meet you there. Alright, so it looks like all of the updates have been installed, so what I'm going to do right now is reboot the server, and then after it comes back up, we'll go ahead and continue. So to do that, I will type reboot, and then I'll press enter. And it's going to take a minute or two for this instance to reboot, so what I'll do is just pause the recording right here, and then I'll be right back. I think enough time has actually passed by now, so let's go ahead and see if we can get reconnected to the server. So I just pressed the up arrow, and that's the same exact command that I used earlier to initially connect to the server. So if it's back online, then, well, this should work. And it seems to be working fine. I have a password prompt. And now we're in. And check out the bash prompt. It's actually showing the first part of the fully qualified domain name, which must mean that it took the hostname that we gave it earlier. And if I type hostname on the command line, we could actually confirm that the name is what we expect it to be, and, well, it is. But there's one more thing that we should do before we get started with the actual Gitea installation. And what that is we'll need to create a few users here, so that way we're not only getting away from using root, but Gitea is going to need its own user as well. So first what I'll do is create a user for myself, and to do that, I'll type user add. And -m. What -m will do is make sure that I have a home directory. That's definitely something that I'd like to have. And I'll give myself the username of J. I think that's good enough. And the user should be created, but I will need to create a password for the user. So as root, I will type passwd and then the username of the user that I've just created. And I'll create the password. And it took the new password. That's really awesome. And if we use the tail command against the etc password file, password is abbreviated in this case, we should actually see the new user that I've just created. And it looks like it worked because my user is listed right there at the bottom. Next up, I want to make sure that my user can execute sudo commands. And what I'll do is make my user a member of the wheel group. So usermod -lowercase a uppercase G together. And then the group we want to add the user to, which is going to be wheel. And then the name of the user that we want to add to that group, which is mine. So to confirm that the group membership has been updated, I could type groups and then the username. And as you can see right here, my user is indeed a member of the group wheel. So we should be good there. So continuing on, what I'm going to do is create a brand new user. And the user that I'll be creating is actually going to be used for the Gitea application, and it's going to be a system user. There's a distinction between a normal user and a system user, and that's important for security. So to create this user, what I'm going to do is run user add, and I'll include the -r option, and that's the option that's going to designate this user as a system user. The M option is going to give me a home directory for that user. And the S option will help me define a shell for the user as well, which I will set to /bin/bash, just like that. The name of the user I'll be creating, I'm going to call it Gitea. So if this works, then I should end up with a system user named Gitea that I'll be using for the application. Let's see what happens. Well, it didn't give me any error messages, so it looks like it probably worked. To make sure of that, I'll again tell the etc password file. And we can see the system user of Gitea there at the bottom. It has a user ID of 994 and a group ID of 991. So user IDs and group IDs under 1000 are very typical when it comes to system users. So we should be good when it comes to this particular user. So let's go ahead and move on to the next step. Now we will need to install Git in order for this to work at all. And what we should do is just find out, do we have Git installed already? And in my case, I don't. If I did, it would actually give me the path to the binary for Git, so we could safely assume that Git is not installed. So to get that installed, we could run dnf install and then Git. It should be that simple. So I'll press enter. So it's going to install a number of dependencies here, and that's fine. I'll confirm with Y and then enter. And then I'll let these packages install, and I'll be right back. So we have Git installed, and that box is now checked. And as you can see, we have Git installed at user bin git. So it's right there ready for us. Next, what we're going to do is install SQLite. So DNF install SQLite, just like you see there on the screen. And I will have a link to a blog post that you could check out that's going to have all of these commands on it. So if you want to copy and paste, you'll be able to do that. So we're going to install it. I'll confirm that by pressing Y and then enter. And, well, SQLite is installed. So the next step will be to download Gitea. I mean, we can't run Gitea if we don't download it. So where do we get it from? Well, before I show you the download page, what we want to do is we want to make sure that we have wget, because that's how we're going to actually get the file onto the server. So I'll type which and then wget. And unfortunately, I don't have that installed. So as you could probably guess by now, I'm going to run DNF and then install. I want to make sure that I have wget because we're about to use it here very shortly. And this one should also install fairly quickly, so I'll just type Y and then enter. And there you go, it's already done. So let's switch over to a browser. We want to find the download link for the latest version of Gitea. So what I'm going to do here is just cheat a bit and just type Gitea download. And I'll just type that right into the address bar to do a quick search. Right here we have a link to download the binary, so I'll click on that. Let's go ahead and download it. And this is really cool. Right here in the documentation for Gitea, they're actually giving us the full download command for downloading Gitea to our server via wget, which is pretty cool. And that's really convenient. So I will copy this command right here. And let's switch back over to the terminal and we'll paste it in. So if this works, it should actually download Gitea locally. So I'll press enter. And it's downloading. So I'm going to let this finish and then I'll be right back. And we should have Gitea downloaded to our server right now. And to confirm that, I'll just list the storage, and sure enough, Gitea is right there. But we'll need to mark it executable, otherwise there's really nothing we can do with it. We need permission to run it as a binary in order for it to be of use. So I can run chmod +x, and I'll do so against the Gitea binary. And as you can see, it's now executable. It's not just that the color turned green, we actually have X's on the left-hand side. I have a whole video on my channel already about permissions if you are curious what that permission string actually represents. But it is executable, so that box is now checked. Now, it's not going to be a good idea to run Gitea from root's home directory, so what I'd like to do is move it to a better directory, and I'll do so with the mv command. I want to move Gitea, and I'll move it into user local bin. And when I type which Gitea, just like you see here, it's showing me the full path to the binary. So far so good. I'll clear the screen. And the next thing that I want to do is create the required directories for Gitea, and I'm just pulling this right off the documentation page for Gitea. So I'll run make dir -p. I want it to create the parent directory if necessary. And I want to create /var live and then Gitea. And then there's going to be a few subdirectories here that I want to create. And I could actually have all three of these subdirectories created in one shot. To do that, I'll type an open curly brace, like you see right here. The first subdirectory will be custom. The second will be data. And then the third will be log. I'll add the closing brace and then I'll press enter. And as you can see right here, we have the three directories that we need for Gitea, so that's pretty cool. Next, let's go ahead and change the permissions for those directories that we've just created. So chmod -r, we want this change to be recursive. Permissions will be 750. Again, I have a permissions video on my channel already, so if this is confusing for you, if you don't know what this means, then you could check out that video. Otherwise, you could simply type what I'm showing right here and it should work just fine. And we want to change the permissions on /var/lib and then Gitea. And then next we'll create another directory. And the directory we will create is /etc/gitea. So I'll press enter. And then next what we want to do is change the ownership of that directory. And I would like that directory to be owned by root. That's better for security anyway. Colon, and then the name of the group that we want to make sure that we've added. And I'll add it to the Gitea group. And the directory that I want to change the ownership on is going to be /etc/gitea. And I'll list the storage of it. And as you can see, the directory does exist. It's owned by root as the user, and the group that owns it is Gitea. So far, so good. And now we'll update the permissions again, this time for the etc Gitea directory. chmod 770, and those are the permissions for this particular folder. And again, the folder that we'll be modifying is /etc/gitea. Now another thing that we'll need to do that I almost forgot is we'll need to change the group ownership for the directory that we created for Gitea, specifically the var/lib Gitea directory. We already changed the ownership for etc Gitea, but we need to also do the same for var/lib Gitea as well. So what I'll do is type chown -R and then Gitea with a colon at the end. And then the directory is going to be /var/lib and then Gitea just like that. And as you can see right here, Gitea now owns those directories, so we should be good to go, at least as far as the permissions are concerned. Now next, what I'm going to do is create a systemd unit file for Gitea, and this will make sure that the application always starts up when the server starts up. And in addition to that, it's also going to create the environment variable that's needed as well. But in order to create the service, we'll need a service file, and thankfully Gitea makes that available, so we can simply grab it, and then we can customize it as necessary, enable it, and that should do the trick. So I'll switch back to a browser. And I will have this URL in the blog post for this video, but for right now, I'm just going to type it in manually. It's https://, and then it's actually located on GitHub. And then go-gitea. Gitea again, type the word blob, main, contrib, systemd, and then it's going to be called gitea.service. What I'm going to do is click the raw button right here. That's going to strip all of the UI off the page. So that way it makes it super easy to go ahead and copy this entire file. So that way we could add it to our server. So what I'll do is just highlight every line in this file. I'll right click and copy it. And let's go back over to the terminal. And we'll just use a text editor, whatever your preferred text editor happens to be. My favorite is Vim, but Nano is good too. /etc/systemd, then system, and we're going to call it gitea.service. And let's go ahead and paste right here. And then we'll go all the way up to the top. So what we'll need to do here is just go through the file and just make sure that everything is true. And basically we're just looking for anything that might be inconsistent. For example, if it's calling a username that's different than the username we've actually created, we want to make sure that that lines up. So just take a quick browse through this file right here. And I see the first thing right here that we should edit. The user in this case is called Git, but on my end, I used Gitea for the user. So we want to make sure that that matches, and now it does. Let's see if there's anything else here that we want to confirm. And here we see the user is referenced again. We want to make sure that we correct that to Gitea. We'll do the same for the home directory as well. And we have those updated, so let's continue on, see if there's anything else. Now that should be everything, but we should take another look at the file just to make sure that we didn't miss anything, so I'll just go back up. And actually, I do see something that I missed right here. The group is actually Gitea as well. So if I left this file alone, then, well, Gitea wouldn't start, would it? Now let's go ahead and save the file. Control O and then enter, and then Control X to exit out. Next up, let's run systemctl, and then daemon-reload. That's just going to make sure that systemd is aware of the new service file that we've just created. And we didn't get any output, but I wasn't expecting any output. That's a pretty simple command right there. And next, let's see if the systemd unit file is actually understood and recognized by the system. So we could run systemctl, and then status, and then Gitea just like that. And as you can see right here, it does indeed recognize Gitea as a valid service on the system. So it looks like our installation of the systemd unit file was done correctly. Now, something to make you guys aware of is the fact that Gitea will not start if SELinux is enabled. Now, normally what I would prefer you guys to do is actually create an SELinux policy that will allow Gitea to run. So what I'm going to do is actually change the mode of SELinux to permissive. Now, that's not my preferred way to handle this situation, though. I'm not a fan of disabling or actually weakening SELinux because it's there to help us and increase our security. However, a full tutorial of SELinux is beyond the scope of this particular video. So after you're finished going through this video, then I challenge you guys to get Gitea working with SELinux fully enabled. So just go ahead and see how to create a custom policy to achieve that. But for right now, I'm going to change the mode, and then we're going to just go along with that for the rest of this video. And to do that, I'll use nano, and I will edit etc selinux/config. And then I'll go here to the SELinux line. And what I'll do is change that to permissive. And in the case where I'm going to be disabling SELinux, I prefer to actually set it to permissive mode rather than outright disabling it. I mean, at least that way, if there's any kind of intrusion attempt, I will at least see some information in the logs. But if you disable it, then you won't have that information either. Anyhow, what I'll do is save the file right now, Control O and then enter, Control X. And the next time this particular server reboots, then SELinux will be in permissive mode. Right now, if I run SEStatus, it's actually fully enabled. So even though I've edited that file, that only changes when I reboot the server. That doesn't actually make the change take effect right now. So in the interest of time, I could reboot it, but rather than wait for the server to reboot again in order for that change to take effect, what I'll do instead is actually execute a command that will temporarily change the mode for SELinux. And then in my case, it may as well be a permanent change since I've actually configured SELinux in the config file to start in permissive mode. This is just going to make sure that SELinux is changed to permissive mode right now. So to do that, I will type set enforce, and then I'll set that to 0. And that should be good enough for now. So let's go ahead and start up Gitea and make sure that it actually works. And to do that, we could run systemctl, and then start, and the name of the service is gitea.service. And now let's check the status to see whether or not Gitea is actually working. So because I'm lazy, I'm not going to type all of that again. I'll just simply change the keyword of start to status, just like that. And check this out. The status is active and running. That's really cool. So this is really a good sign. That means that Gitea is running. But unfortunately, if we were to go to the browser and try to access this, it's still not going to work because we have one more thing that we have to do to actually allow access. So I'll clear the screen and then we'll move on to the next and possibly final step in the process. Now, I'm currently still logged in as root and I really don't like that. During this video, I've actually created a user for myself. So technically, I really shouldn't be using root anymore. So what I'll do is exit. And that closed out my session. And let's see if I can actually access the server with my username, the name of the user that I created earlier in the video, which was J. Let's see if that works. So far, so good. And actually, I'm logged in. That's pretty cool. So now I can avoid using root going forward, and we can go ahead and continue. Now, like I mentioned, we need to add the firewall rule to the server, because if we don't do that, then, well, we're not going to be able to connect to it. So in order to do that, I'll first run sudo, I need to use that now that I'm not logged in as root anymore. That'll help me elevate my privileges to root. I'm going to run firewall -cmd. I want to make a permanent change. And the zone that I want to edit is going to be the public zone. I'm going to add a port. So --add -port. And then I'll set that equal to 3000. Port 3000 is actually the port that Gitea will run under by default. And then I'll type /tcp and I'll press enter. So next I'll type in the password for the user, and this will help me understand whether or not sudo is working. And just like that, the command was successful. So what we'll do now is actually reload the firewall. So again, sudo and then firewall cmd --reload. That should do it, so I'll press enter. And again, success. So at this point, Gitea should be publicly available. You should be able to open up a web browser and access the server. Let's go ahead and see if we can. So here in my browser, what I should be able to do is access the Gitea application. And since this will be the first time that I'm accessing it, I should see a configuration page that'll help me, well, configure the application. So what I'll do is run http:// and then on your end, what you could do is type the IP address right here if that's all you have. If you, like me, created a domain name for your server, then you could add that right here. Since I did create a fully qualified domain name off camera, then what I'll do is type git.learnlinux.cloud:3000. 3000 is the default port number that Gitea will run under, so I'll press enter, and let's see if it works. And so far, so good. So this is the configuration page, and we're going to want to pay special attention to this page, because if we make any mistakes, then we'll have to start the configuration over. Now, thankfully, that's not hard to do. If you make a mistake, you can simply delete the app.ini file in the etc Gitea directory. But let's go ahead and just take our time, so that way we won't make any mistakes. Now, first of all, for the database type, I'll change that to SQLite 3. That's the simpler option here. Now, if you're going to have a bunch of people using this, then you'll definitely want to make sure that you use a full database server, something like MariaDB or similar. But for our purposes today, I think this should be good enough. Now, for the title, you could go ahead and keep the default, or you could give it a custom name. And I'll just name mine the Learn Linux TV Git Server. That should be good enough. Now for the server domain, we're definitely going to want to edit this right here. I mean, localhost is not resolvable outside of the server. So what you could do is actually type the IP address right here if that's all you have. But if you have a domain name, you could type that as well. So in my case, it's git.learnlinux.cloud. SSH port, we'll leave that as the default. Same with the port of 3000. Right here we have localhost. We want to definitely get rid of that and type the same thing that we typed earlier. So in my case, again, git.learnlinux.cloud. And let's scroll down. And what we'll want to do is create a new administrator account. Now for the username, what we want to do is give it a custom username. Don't use admin or administrator or any of those things that, other people would probably assume you're going to use. Now in my case, I will just call my user Optimus Prime. I have no idea why I decided to choose that, but that's what my username is going to be. I think Optimus Prime is cool, so it works out. And let's give this user a password. And again. And then I'll type in my email address right here. And we should have answered everything that we needed to answer here, so I will install Gitea. Let's click this button and see what happens. And check this out. It logged me right in, and I am actually using Gitea right now. Now what I'm going to do is just sign out real quick and just sign in again. And I'll just make sure that authentication is working fine. I see no reason why it wouldn't be. But it did log me right in, so that was very useful, but I want to go ahead and log in myself and just make sure that everything is fine. So I typed in my super secret password, and let's click the sign in button. and I'm signed right into the server. That's pretty cool. So what I'm going to do is create a repository right now. So I'll click New Repository. And I will call the repository test repo. This is just a test. I think that should be fine. And we'll create the repository. So now we have the repository. That's pretty cool. So I'll copy the URL to the repository right here, and then I'll switch back to the terminal. And let's paste it right here. So we have the URL to the Git repository, and what I'll do is type git clone. We want to pull down that repository, so I'll press enter. And here's telling me that I've actually cloned an empty repository, which might be a red flag, but in our case, we haven't actually added anything yet, so we should be good. We're actually expecting it to be empty at this point. So anyway, let's go ahead and cd into that repository. We have nothing in there right now. Well, actually, that's not true. We have a .git directory. That's expected. But let's actually create a file and push it upstream and make sure that everything is working. So what I'll do is just use a text editor. I will edit testfile.txt. Inside there, what I'll do is I will type Gitea is awesome. I'll save the file, exit out. And it's showing me right here that it's detected a new file. So I will add that file to version control. And git add is the command of choice to accomplish that. Let's run git status again. And now it's telling me that a new file will be committed. And I do have a beginner video on how to use Git if you're interested, so don't worry so much about memorizing these commands. I'm just trying to make sure that everything works properly. So anyway, I will type git commit, and then -a, I want to include everything, and then -m, that's going to allow me to type a message. I'll just type initial commit. Usually you do want your commit messages to be more verbose than this, but this is just a test, which is why I don't care at the moment. And of course, it wants me to go ahead and type my information here. I keep forgetting this step, no matter how many times I use Git. So let's go ahead and do it at once. And due to the fact that this is a test, I don't really care about the email address. And then we'll customize the user.name as well. And let's go ahead and run that again. And now the git commit actually worked, but we're not going to have the changes upstream just yet. So what I'll do is run git, and then push origin, and then master. So it's asking us for the username, which I set to be Optimus Prime. And then it wants the password. I'll type that in. And check this out. It looks like it's working. Let's find out. So here we have the actual repository. I didn't refresh the page yet. So if I do refresh it, we now have the test file right here. And as you can see, it says Gitea is awesome. So it looks like everything is working just fine. So if you're following along with me, then congratulations, you now have your very own Git server running on AlmaLinux powered by Gitea. So at this point, you should have your very own Git server with Gitea. Gitea is actually one of my favorite applications to self-host. It's a really powerful application, it's lightweight, and as you just saw, it's easy to set up. Now hopefully this video has helped you out in getting yours set up, and if it has, please be sure to click that like button if you did like this video, because that lets YouTube know that other people might benefit from having their own Gitea server as well. As always, I have some awesome content coming very soon. I upload every week, so make sure you subscribe if you haven't already done so, and I'll see you in the next video.